Love is a word capable of stirring up a storm of emotions, a force that can transform, elevate, and even destroy. But what does it truly mean to love? How do you recognize true love? And perhaps most disconcerting of all, why does it sometimes seem like we are being ignored when we are loved? Paradoxical, isn't it? We have been taught that love is attention, devotion, unconditional giving. We have been told that a loving person is always there, will never leave, and will never make you doubt. But what if true love manifests differently? What if it has a deeper psychological undercurrent that is not always apparent at first glance? Today we must delve into a truth that can wound, but at the same time, liberate. To unlock the secret of actions that seem cold, detached, and even cruel, but are actually manifestations of one of the most sincere forms of love. To understand this, it is necessary to shatter established beliefs, because love is not always what it seems. There is a certain romantic ideal that lives in each of us, an almost childlike idea of what love should be. We have been told that a loving person expresses their feelings with words, touches, visible gestures that dispel uncertainty. We have been convinced that love is something instantaneous, and if a person feels strong feelings, they should express them constantly, without pauses or doubts. But the reality is that love is not just intense emotions, a racing heartbeat, or butterflies in the stomach. Love is also self-analysis, personal growth, internal struggle, and sometimes silence. When someone truly loves, they will not always act as expected. They will not always be there when they are needed. Because genuine love is not subject to the rules of dependence, but to the laws of freedom. Let's take a moment to think about this question. When a person feels a deep connection with you, when their heart is engulfed in genuine and transformative love, it is as if it awakens dormant shadows in their own soul. It is not limited to just the feelings they have for you. This love becomes a catalyst for internal change. True love is like a mirror that forces us to look closely at ourselves, exposing our deepest wounds and ingrained fears. But not everyone is ready for such self-analysis. That is why sometimes, when someone feels sincere love for you, instead of getting closer, they may distance themselves. Instead of seeking your closeness, they may hide in the shadows. This does not happen out of indifference, but because love disarms them, takes them out of their comfort zone. And this is where the psychological underpinnings of such behavior come into play. One of the leading figures in the field of personal growth emphasized that all our experiences in relationships are a reflection of our inner world. Love does not arise from emptiness. Connection is not born from nothing. Every emotion, every reaction, every gesture that we share with another person originates in the relationship that we maintain with ourselves. Therefore, if someone loves you, but at the same time distances themselves, it does not necessarily mean that they do not want to be with you. Perhaps there is an internal conflict raging in their soul that they have not yet resolved. Perhaps their love for you has touched a painful wound that they have not encountered before. And this leads us to a key point. Each person's reaction to love depends on their personal history, their past wounds, and deepest fears. Some people grew up in an environment where love was associated with pain. Perhaps they witnessed constant arguments between their parents or experienced rejections that left a deep mark on their childhood. For them, love represents danger. To love is to open up, and to open up is to become vulnerable. Others have learned to love out of a sense of need, seeking in a partner someone who will complement them, provide security, and fill the internal voids that they have not been able to heal on their own. And when such people encounter true love, born not from dependence, but from conscious choice. They feel lost because healthy love does not correspond to their usual ideas. Sometimes a paradoxical situation arises in relationships. A person who has warm feelings for you suddenly begins to behave aloof. Do not rush to see this as an immediate rejection or proof of your inadequacy. Think about it, because silence can be a way of making sense of what is happening. And distance is not a sign of a lack of love, but a manifestation of fear of its all-consuming power. When love catches you off guard, disarms you, and forces you to look into the depths of your own soul, a person is faced with a choice: to fully open up to the feelings or to retreat, fleeing from unpredictable changes. Flight in this case is not a rejection of love as such, but a fear of the transformations that it may entail. True love is not a cozy and safe feeling, but rather a hurricane that sweeps everything in its path, forcing one to rethink their essence, desires, and hidden emotional wounds. For some, it is a revelation. For others, it is a threat. The fear of love is a real psychological phenomenon rooted in our experience of building relationships. People who associate love with loss, betrayal, or rejection activate defense mechanisms when faced with strong feelings. It's not about the absence of feelings, but about their excessive intensity. A complex dilemma arises: the desire to be close and the unconscious desire to distance oneself, the need for intimacy and the horror of vulnerability. It's no secret that in the intricacies of human relationships, it's not uncommon for us to misjudge what's happening, led by prejudice. Public opinion, like a pesky advisor, tells us that distance is synonymous with indifference. Coldness is a sure sign of a lack of feeling, and silence is an unambiguous signal of dislike. However, life, like a skilled artist, likes to play with the colors of contrasts, and sometimes the truth is hidden behind a veil of deceptive appearances. Consider this: when a person's heart is overflowing with sincere love, it becomes vulnerable, like a fragile flower in the wind. If this person, like a traveler wounded by the thorns of the past, has not been able to heal their emotional wounds, if their mind is still clouded by the shadows of past traumas and fears, then love, instead of a long-awaited blessing, can be perceived as a sinister threat. The problem is that most of us, like blind kittens, poke our noses into the darkness of our own complexes and insecurities. Noticing alienation on the part of a loved one, we grab onto it like drowning people clutching at straws, demanding explanations and imposing an intimacy that they may not yet be ready for. And it is at this moment, as if by magic, that the very magic that once bound two hearts together is destroyed. Love is not a chain that binds freedom. It is not a cage that keeps someone nearby just to satisfy our own fears. True love, like a wise mentor, shows understanding and respect, providing the necessary space for personal growth and self-discovery. Imagine a person whose life has been marked by the fear of being rejected and betrayed. He, like a seasoned warrior, has erected impregnable bastions around himself to protect himself from new wounds. And then, fate brings him together with you, with a love that sees through him, feels his pain, and understands his doubts. A love that demands no sacrifices and exerts no pressure, but simply exists in all its fullness and strength. For some, this becomes a healing balm, healing old wounds and giving hope for a brighter future. For others, on the contrary, this spectacle can terrify, awakening dormant demons of the past. This is precisely why love sometimes takes forms that we find difficult to understand and accept. Don't rush to jump to conclusions, accusing a person of lacking feelings. Perhaps he is waging a fierce inner struggle that he cannot express in words. Remember that behind the mask of alienation may lie a wounded heart in need of understanding and support. So what do you do when you encounter a situation where a person who has warm feelings for you suddenly starts to distance themselves? It is important to realize that you are not a healer of other people's emotional wounds. It is impossible to force someone to love you the way you want them to, especially if that person is still in the process of overcoming their own internal conflicts. Love is not a battlefield where everyone tries to pull the blanket over themselves, and it is not endless bargaining between closeness and alienation. It is rather a natural flow that requires respect for each person's pace and emotional state. If a person who loves you suddenly starts to distance themselves, it would be wrong to chase after them, make demands, or try to persuade them to stay. The right answer is to let them go, provide space without resentment, and with faith that if this love is real, it will definitely find a way to return. Love has its own special language, which does not always manifest itself as we expect. Sometimes it hides in silence, in pauses, in actions that seem inexplicable. Behind every action, even those that confuse us, lies its own story, a psychological background that gives meaning to what at first seems illogical. After all, not everyone knows how to love the same way. Each of us carries an emotional map that has been formed throughout our lives under the influence of experience and emotional trauma. This map determines our approach to other people, how we give and receive love. Some grew up in families where affection was expressed through words, constant tokens of attention. For them, love is presence, care, and the assurance that the other person will always be there. Others, on the contrary, have learned that love is a fragile thing that can disappear at any moment, and that loving too much can be dangerous. When these two different views of love meet, conflict is inevitable. The person who is used to love based on certainty is constantly seeking confirmation of their feelings. They need attention, visible displays of love that give them a sense of security. But the person who is used to loving from a distance, out of self-preservation, tends to retreat, weigh every step, and not rush to give themselves completely. This is not because they do not love, but because their love has a different rhythm. This is where the root of misunderstandings and emotional turmoil lies. When a loved one begins to distance themselves, our mind, like a biased judge, delivers a verdict. They have lost interest. Their love has faded. We are tormented by doubts about our own attractiveness. We look for flaws in ourselves. We dig into past mistakes. But let's face it, love is not always a fireworks display of passion and constant declarations. Often, true love is manifested in providing personal space, in respecting the other person's need for silence and self-reflection. After all, love is not an amusement park ride, but a real test. It is not only the intoxicating feeling of being in love, but also the inevitable confrontation with our own demons, with hidden fears that have been dormant in the depths of our souls for years, with the vulnerability that we so carefully hide from prying eyes. And when a person feels defenseless, their first reaction is not always to seek closeness. Often the instinct for self-preservation pushes them to flee, to seek a secluded corner where they can sort out their feelings, understand what is happening in their inner world. And this is where the true qualities of a loving person are revealed: patience, empathy, and wisdom. The ability to distinguish fleeing from love from fleeing from indifference is what distinguishes mature relationships from infantile ones. Yes, of course, there are people who distance themselves because their heart is not touched. But there are also those who run from intimacy because their feelings are too strong, too burning. The paradox is that modern people crave immediate answers. We want to know for sure what is going on in the other person's soul, what they are thinking about, what plans they are making. We cannot bear uncertainty. We need guarantees, promises, unwavering confidence in tomorrow. But love is not a strict mathematical calculation. It is a living, changing process, a turbulent flow of emotions that does not always lend itself to control. It is here, on this fine line, that many suffer a crushing defeat, not in the feeling of love itself, but in understanding its deep mechanics. If we, like wise strategists, could learn to perceive love with less baggage of expectations and with more empathy, with a rejection of obsessive control, and with an acceptance of its multifaceted nature, we could enjoy it in a healthier way. After all, when someone sincerely loves you, even if circumstances temporarily separate your paths, that love does not disappear without a trace. The invisible thread that connects you remains intact. And if you give that person the necessary space, do not rush events, do not perceive their distance as a final break, then over time you will see how that love finds its own unique balance. Love is a complex dance, because people themselves are complex beings. We do not move in straight lines. Our feelings do not fit into clear schemes. We do not always react the way we are expected to. Sometimes we love silently, protecting this feeling from prying eyes. Sometimes love scares us more than it pleases us, like a leap into the unknown. And sometimes we distance ourselves not because we want to, but because we do not know how to stay, how to cope with this new, exciting feeling. The problem is that we are fed from childhood with a simplified version of love, flat and predictable. We are led to believe that if someone loves us, then they must demonstrate it in a certain way. Increased attention, a continuous stream of words, ostentatious gestures. But the reality is much deeper and more subtle. There are people who have learned to love based on the instinct of self-preservation, erecting impregnable barriers around themselves, because in the past they were cruelly wounded, because they saw love turn into a source of unbearable pain. And when these people encounter real, genuine love, they get lost, not knowing what to do with it. It is as if they suddenly see their reflection in a mirror that they have never looked into before. A mirror that ruthlessly exposes their fears, their insecurities, everything that they have been trying for years to hide from themselves and from the outside world. And when true love knocks on the door of someone who is not ready for it, it can be perceived not as a long-awaited blessing, but as a deadly threat. It's not that this person doesn't want to love, but rather that they don't know how to do it without losing themselves in the process. True love not only awakens the best in us, but also forces us to confront what we haven't healed from our past. Paradoxically, a budding, deep feeling sometimes pushes people not closer together, but in opposite directions. It's not about indifference, but about love, touching something sacred that the person isn't ready for yet. This unconscious defense mechanism is an attempt to hide from something that seems all-consuming and uncontrollable. However, from the perspective of the person waiting, this is perceived as rejection, as a lack of reciprocity, which generates pain, confusion, and a thirst for explanations. We struggle to accept that love isn't always straightforward and doesn't develop according to a predictable script. It's hard to accept that everyone has their own pace, their own way of feeling and expressing emotions. Often we try to force events, demanding immediate answers and guarantees, searching for signs in every gesture and word. But love doesn't tolerate fear, pressure, or demands. Real love needs space, freedom, and time to grow and mature. If a person distances themselves, it doesn't always mean the end of love. Perhaps they simply need to sort out their feelings, understand them, and understand if they're ready to accept them in their entirety. The problem is that the fear of being rejected pushes us to desperate actions. We're afraid of losing the person forever and try to hold on to them, demanding explanations and filling the void with conjecture. In the end, we only exacerbate the situation because love doesn't tolerate haste or coercion. Love must be released, given freedom and space. If the feeling is genuine, it will find its way back, not at our demand, but by the will of fate. Love is an unpredictable element, foreign to strict laws and precise calculations. Sometimes, it bursts into our lives like a whirlwind, sweeping away old landmarks and radically changing our perception of the world. In other cases, it's like a slow fire, patiently kindling in the little things, in the quiet closeness of two souls getting to know each other. But it also happens that love, instead of bringing us closer, creates alienation. Someone who swears love suddenly begins to distance themselves for no apparent reason, leaving a gaping void and a swarm of unanswered questions. In such moments, the mind is gripped by anxiety. We eagerly seek explanations, try to decipher hidden signs, and replay every word, gesture, and pause in the conversation over and over in our heads. We desperately want to find meaning in the inexplicable, forgetting that love awakens not only bright feelings, desire, and tenderness, but also dark ones, fear, insecurity, doubts, which can prove insurmountable. For some people, love is not only a gift, but also a serious test, because true love implies vulnerability, complete openness, a willingness to show the other person not only their strengths, but also their weaknesses, their emotional wounds, what we carefully hide even from ourselves. And not everyone is ready for that. There are those who have known love as a source of pain, who have grown up watching it turn into control, rejection, disappointment. For them, love is primarily a risk. And when they meet someone capable of awakening a real, deep, and sincere feeling in them, their first reaction is not embrace, but flight. They distance themselves not because they don't feel, but because they feel too strongly. There is a common but superficial understanding of love based on simple logic of presence. We are taught that if a person loves, they will always be there. Their feelings will be supported by words and actions, and there will be no room for doubt in their love. However, this view greatly simplifies the complex reality of this feeling. Love is not only external manifestations, but also deep internal processes, sometimes invisible emotional struggles taking place in each person's heart. When a loved one distances themselves, it often happens not because of fading feelings, but because of their inner need to sort out their own experiences related to love. Perhaps they have reached the point where the feeling that overwhelms them confronts them with unknown facets of their own personality, causing internal conflict. Unfortunately, in such a situation, most people react impulsively. Noticing alienation, they seek to close the distance, demanding immediate explanations and confirmations of the inviolability of the relationship. However, in this haste, dictated by the fear of loss, they risk suffocating the sprout of the natural development of feelings. Love, like air, needs freedom. It's not an endless chase where one runs away and the other tries to catch up. It's more like a harmonious dance of two people finding their unique way to move together in a single rhythm. Therefore, if a loving person suddenly distances themselves, perhaps instead of panicking and trying to hold on to them at any cost, bombarding them with questions and reproaches, it's worth taking a step back and observing. In English, not out of fear of rejection, but out of confidence that true love will always find its way. After all, love is not a test of strength, nor is it a battlefield with a victor and a vanquished. It's an encounter between two souls who voluntarily decide to share life's journey. And for a genuine connection to occur, both parties must be ready. It's difficult to accept that love sometimes requires pauses, that not everything should happen instantly, that there are processes that take time. One must realize that detachment doesn't always signify a lack of feelings, but can be an attempt to sort them out. It's this understanding that allows us to love more maturely, without fear and the obsessive urge to force the natural course of events. Unfortunately, many relationships fail precisely because of this. In an attempt to avoid uncertainty and the pain associated with it, we end up causing even greater pain. The pain of love, deprived of freedom and the opportunity to develop at its own pace. Love is a delicate balance between intimacy and personal space, between selflessness and independence. And recognizing this frees us from excessive control and painful obsession. Don't torment yourself trying to decipher every gesture, agonizingly interpreting every silence as a harbinger of fading love. If someone who loves you suddenly distances themselves, give them the time and space they need. Don't fill the resulting void with anxiety, unfounded speculation, and undue pressure. Believe that true love, like a river, will always find its way back. And it will return not because of your demands or pursuits, but because you will both be ready to go through this trial together in all its fullness. True love isn't always a walk in the park. It's not just the initial thrill of mutual attraction or the exciting butterflies in the stomach during first encounters. To truly love is an act of courage, a voluntary commitment not only to another person, but also to yourself. It means looking into the reflection of your relationship, seeing what love awakens in us, joy, passion, tenderness, but also hidden fears, insecurities, and old wounds from the past that we naively believed were long buried. When someone who loves you distances themselves, the first and most common reaction is panic. Thoughts begin to swarm in your head that something has changed, something has broken, that this distance is the beginning of the end. But we often overlook the fact that for some people, distancing themselves is the only way to process their emotions, to make sense of what's happening. There are people who simply don't know how to deal with love immediately, in the moment. Not because they don't feel those feelings, but because love forces them to confront aspects of their personality that they have never explored before. Imagine a person who has believed all their life that love always goes hand in hand with suffering. A person who has witnessed painful breakups, experienced feelings of abandonment, felt the full weight of disappointment. For such a person, love is not just an act of self-sacrifice, but also a huge risk, because deep down, they fear that love will inevitably be followed by pain. And when they encounter true love, with a person who looks at them with sincerity, offers them a connection without games or manipulations, their first reaction is far from always being full openness. Often their reaction is to step back, to try to understand if they are ready for something so large and deep. The problem is that on the other side, from the perspective of the waiting person, this alienation is perceived as rejection. It's interpreted as a lack of interest, as a sign that the other person doesn't feel the same way. And this is where misunderstandings, unfounded assumptions, and desperate attempts to get answers begin. But love isn't built on despair. It doesn't flourish under pressure or in an atmosphere of anxiety. It grows stronger in understanding, in patience, in the ability to allow another person to walk their own path without feeling obligated to rush their feelings. It's hard to accept that everyone loves differently. For some, love is a constant affirmation of feelings, while for others it's a slow discovery, an uncharted territory that needs to be explored with caution and respect. When two different expressions of love collide, disagreements and misunderstandings inevitably arise. One partner may feel an imbalance, believing they are giving more than they are receiving in return, while the other feels cornered, feeling premature pressure. Love, however, should not be a burden of demands or obsessive control, filling the silence with endless questions and interpreting every manifestation of distance as betrayal. True love lies in the ability to feel the rhythm of another person, to understand that there are internal processes hidden from prying eyes. It's believing that with a genuine connection, a loved one will find a way back when they are ready. It's important to recognize that fear of love isn't just an abstraction, it's a very real feeling. Some people have learned to exist without love, viewing dependence on anyone as a threat. Love can seem dangerous to those who have built their lives on principles of absolute independence and emotional self-sufficiency, convinced of the need for constant protection from potential wounds. When such a person encounters sincere love, devoid of hidden motives and manipulations, they may feel disarmed, losing their accustomed course of action. Old strategies become useless, and there arises a need for personal space and time to realize their readiness to open their heart without fear. This process may seem paradoxical. If they love me, why are they pulling away? If they have genuine feelings, why don't they stay? However, behind this lies an internal struggle, invisible to those around them. True love can be both a priceless gift and a heavy trial for someone accustomed to avoiding vulnerability. It's at this stage that many relationships fail, not due to a lack of love, but due to a lack of understanding. When we don't recognize the uniqueness of another person's expression of feelings, when we don't acknowledge that their emotional path is different from our own, we inadvertently enter into a fruitless confrontation. In this struggle, one seeks to hold on, while the other desperately tries to break free. True love shouldn't feel like an intrusive pursuit. Rather, it should be like a long-awaited meeting, a safe haven where both partners can move forward at their own comfortable pace. A natural reaction to a loved one distancing themselves is fear. We begin to delve into ourselves, asking questions. What did we do wrong? Why have they changed? What can we do to restore lost intimacy? However, perhaps the wisest decision in such a situation is to react not out of anxiety, but from a state of calm and awareness. Instead of rushing after an elusive partner, instead of demanding immediate explanations, perhaps it's worth taking a step back and allowing them to follow their own path. After all, if love is real, if feelings are sincere and deep, this person will surely find their way back. Not because we forced or compelled them, but because they made this choice themselves, because they realized that love is not an enemy, not a threat, not something to defend against. Love is not a war in which one must emerge victorious and the other suffer defeat. It's not endless negotiations or a contract with clearly defined clauses. It's more like a process, an exciting journey in which both partners must be willing to walk hand in hand. And if at some point one of the two needs to stop, if they need personal space to sort out their feelings, the best thing we can do is not force them to move, but to trust fate and believe that if it's truly love, it will sooner or later find its own unique balance. Accepting this can be difficult. We have been taught since childhood that love should be instant, that if someone has feelings for us, they should demonstrate them constantly and without any doubt. We have been instilled with the idea that love is absolute certainty, that there should be no room for pauses or moments of confusion in it. However, the reality is that the most genuine and strong love is that which is built gradually, with patience, with respect for each partner's personal process. When a person has deep affection for you, it manifests in their actions. They show due respect, not forcing the development of feelings, but giving themselves time to sort out their true desires. And if these feelings are sincere, no distance can destroy them. The real threat is impatience, fear, and the inability to accept the individual pace of relationship development. After all, true love does not compel, but invites a joint journey. And if it is that true love, the person will stay close not out of a sense of duty, but because they see in this relationship not shackles, but a cozy home. Love in its pristine purity defies predictions and control. It's a powerful force, capable of manifesting both suddenly and intensely, transforming everything around it, and gradually in subtle details that are revealed only over time. But one thing remains constant. Love tests our beliefs, fears, and emotional boundaries. And it is at this moment that many find themselves facing a difficult choice: to surrender to feelings or to erect a wall of protection against the unknown. Some believe that love should be easy and effortless, that when two kindred spirits meet, everything should go smoothly, without hitches or doubts. However, the reality is that love, like any profound aspect of life, comes with its own set of challenges. One of the most significant is the ability to manage the vulnerability it entails. For some, love is akin to walking on thin ice. Every step towards complete surrender reminds them of the possibility of falling, losing control, and experiencing heartache. It's not about the malicious intent of a partner, but rather that opening up completely means accepting the risk that events won't always unfold as desired. When a loved one suddenly becomes distant, it doesn't always indicate that feelings are waning. Often, on the contrary, it's the overwhelming strength of those feelings that causes a person to pause and reflect. They need time to ensure that their emotions aren't simply a projection of their own unrealized desires, emotional issues, or fears hidden beneath a mask of love. In this moment, waiting becomes a true test. Uncertainty is a heavy burden, forcing us to confront our own insecurities, old wounds, and the subconscious desire for control that often manifests in our love. A partner's withdrawal is perceived as a loss of control over the situation, which triggers fear. We crave immediate answers, seek to understand what's happening, and find a way to get everything back on track. However, love doesn't tolerate pressure. It's a mistake to believe that true love requires constant and continuous demonstration. Love, like everything else in life, develops cyclically. Moments of deep intimacy, unbreakable connection, and unconditional giving are followed by periods when it's necessary to step back and view the relationship from a different perspective. This doesn't mean that feelings disappear. They simply need space to strengthen. Unfortunately, many only know love through the lens of dependence, through the need for a partner's constant presence and continuous confirmation of their feelings. Any disruption to this pattern, any pause or need for personal space, is perceived as a threat, as a sign that love is fading. Sometimes, love needs space, a personal corner to breathe. Otherwise, it risks suffocating in a tight embrace. It's in such moments that relationships, without even realizing it, can take on toxic characteristics. One partner, fearing the loss of connection, begins to demand more and more attention, craves immediate answers, constant proof of feelings, and absolute certainty about the future. The other, who simply needs time for self-discovery, begins to feel trapped. And it's not because feelings are fading, but because love shouldn't turn into a prison sentence. The problem is that distance is perceived as betrayal, as a signal of insufficient loyalty, as confirmation that the partner never felt the same way. Instead of allowing the process to develop naturally, desperate attempts are made to force closeness. Silence is filled with accusations, Any excuse is sought to draw attention back to oneself. But many forget that love is built on trust, not anxiety. If a loving person becomes distant, it doesn't necessarily mean that their feelings have changed. Perhaps they're battling internal demons, experiencing a difficult period that they can't express in words. And instead of seeing this distance as the end of the story, it's worth accepting that love also needs breaks, that relationships can't be a straight line without stops. The fact that a partner takes a pause doesn't mean they've abandoned you. The idea of eternal and unbreakable love is so romanticized that many are convinced that true love knows no doubts, needs no time, experiences no moments of silence. But in reality, the strongest unions aren't those in which there were never any pauses, but those who knew how to survive them. Those who understood that love is not only passion and intimacy, but also patience, respect for personal space, and individual processes. It's easy to love when everything is perfect, when there are constant messages, beautiful words, when the partner is always there. But true love manifests in moments of uncertainty, when one of the partners needs to distance themselves, and the other, instead of panicking, is able to wait without resentment or recrimination, without putting pressure, without trying to control the uncontrollable. Because love isn't always absolute certainty that the partner will always be there. In the depths of human relationships lies an unwavering belief that true feeling is capable of surviving, regardless of the miles of separation and the torment of doubts. If there's a genuine connection between two people, distance becomes not an insurmountable wall, but a severe test, a forge where love is tempered and only becomes stronger. In situations where one partner becomes distant, there's a natural desire to regain their favor at all costs, to bombard them with messages, to tirelessly prove one's devotion with words and actions, to constantly remind them of shared moments. However, in the pursuit of holding on to something that is slipping away, many overlook a simple truth. When a person needs personal space, the highest expression of love is not to be intrusive, but to respectfully provide that space. There is no need to demand immediate answers to your questions, or to torment yourself with suspicions and conjectures. It is necessary to believe that a temporary pause cannot destroy a true feeling. If you sincerely love someone, show respect for their inner world and personal process. Do not try to artificially accelerate the course of events. Do not project your own fears and insecurities onto the distance. Do not perceive silence as a manifestation of disinterest and temporary separation as a final break. Remember that true love will always find its way. If another person has sincere feelings for you, if there is a genuine connection between you, you will not have to chase them. Love does not tolerate violence or intrusiveness. It only needs two people, in their own time and at their own pace, to consciously choose to be together again and again.